Welcome again to our Lent reading series to 2023, considering people who encountered Jesus. Today it's day 19, and we're going to look today at two men again, and these ones were blind. There are a number of occasions in the Gospels where Jesus heals the blind. Blindness was a very common occurrence at the time. There was little that could be done for injury, infection, or the conditions we treat so easily today, such as cataracts. The Gospels record a number of encounters with Jesus and the blind, and we're going to look at one today from Matthew chapter 9, and an incident that involved two blind men. From verse 27 it says, "As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, 'Have mercy on us, Son of David.' When he got indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, 'Do you believe that I'm able to do this?' 'Yes, Lord,' they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, 'According to your faith, let it be done to you.' And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, 'See that no one knows about this.' But they went out and spread the news about him all over that region." We've already looked at a time where Jesus healed two demon-possessed men. And at that time we considered why Matthew might have two men when Mark and Luke only have one. And if you want to look at that again, it's in day 13. Here again, Matthew records two blind men, where the other Gospels suggest that only one was present. Interestingly, when you get to Matthew 20, he again records the healing of two men in very similar details. In fact, as you go through the Gospels, it seems that Jesus regularly healed the blind. There's at least 8 occurrences across the Gospels of blind being healed, and Matthew has at least 3 of these accounts. Plus there's other accounts where Jesus healed large groups of people, among whom were the blind, such as in Matthew 15. You might also remember back in our first week when we looked at John the Baptist. He at one point was having questions and sent a group of people to ask Jesus, "Are you truly the Messiah?" And in Matthew 11 his reply comes back, "Go and report to John what you see and hear. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." The first of those comments was the blind receive sight. Throughout the New Testament, physical blindness is often used as a commentary on spiritual blindness. In Matthew 15 and chapter 23, Jesus describes the religious leaders and the Pharisees as blind guides because they failed to recognize who he was, saying, "If the blind lead the blind, both will fall into the pit." In Mark 8, we have a blind man who is healed in 2 stages. Jesus prays for him at first, and he sees partially. He sees people like trees, and then Jesus prays again, and he sees fully. That wasn't a comment on the limits of Jesus' power or the weakness of the man's faith. The passage immediately before is about the Pharisees and Herod, and the blind man's initial blindness is a commentary on their spiritual blindness. The passage immediately afterwards is Peter's confession of Jesus as the Messiah. But Peter only partly sees, like the man after Jesus' first prayer, because he then goes on to try to rebuke Jesus for saying that he's going to be crucified, and Jesus himself rebukes Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan." Paul's temporary blindness on the Damascus road after his encounter with Jesus is a commentary on his spiritual blindness before he met Jesus. And then when the scales fall from his eyes, that's a picture of what took place on that road. Later, Paul will encounter Elymas in Acts 13, and Paul will proclaim on him God's judgment of blindness because he is trying to keep others from seeing who Jesus truly is. Notice the conversation between Jesus and the blind men in the passage that we read earlier. Jesus asked them, "Do you believe?" And they reply, "Yes." And then Jesus says, according to your faith, let it be done. That phrase could have been applied to any of the people we've had in the last few days. The synagogue ruler with a sick daughter, the woman with bleeding who reached out and touched his robe, and now these two men. They were all healed physically because they were already starting to be healed spiritually as their eyes were opened to who Jesus was. These two men, Jesus says, don't tell anybody, but they couldn't help themselves. Wherever they went, they shared what Jesus had done for them. How much more so for us, who Jesus hasn't said be quiet, but he said proclaim the good news to the world. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. We have a glorious message to proclaim. Amen. Until next time, have a blessed day.